Hi guys, and welcome back. We're talking with Zakery Lamb, who has a brain full of information about the brain, basically, and we're going to pick his brains as much as we can in the second half. Welcome back, Zach.
Hello.
Now, I'd like you, if you could, one of the biggest things we hear discussed in pool is the pre-shot, or in any cue sports, the pre-shot routine. What is it? What should we be doing? What may we not know about the pre-shot routine, which we need to know?
Okay, it's a good question. So there's a lot of people, coaches, fantastic coaches, by the way. Please don't they do great work. Um, who talk about the stages of a shot, and a large proportion of my research was to provide a data-driven, evidence-based framework to snooker, and to do that we have to understand each stage of the shot. So I came up with the one, created it myself. It's called the 5 A's. So we have the assessment phase, the approach phase, the alignment phase, the aiming phase, and the action phase. Now, the long-term plan from the PhD perspective is to put a coaching model in place where before, when I talked about forming habits, where you can form habits in each of them 5 spaces, deliver your coaching sessions based on each of them phases, and create a sequence of information during practice where you're focused on each of these areas to create the correct habits and the correct neural networks. Once they become subconscious, we can then learn the mental skills to go alongside it, and you would create an optimized or a close to optimized cue sports player from a science back perspective. The PhD that I'm doing at the moment that will make me a doctor only focuses on the assessment phase. So the assessment phase is the pre-programming phase. That's the name of it in psychology. And it's basically, if the table's here and the person's here, they're stood behind the line of the shot. They're judging, they're processing, they're pre-programming the brain with the information that they need to be able to play the shot. Then what happens is you make an approach. So you've made all your decisions. Hopefully, you've made all your decisions stood up. Not everyone does. You've solved the problems. You've made your decisions stood up. Stood up. You then approach. Now, when we approach, we use large muscle groups. We use like serial movement. So we're using big muscles, not fine motor movements. I'll go into them in a minute. We're using big muscle groups. So we're using our back, our chest, our legs, our hamstrings, our biceps, our triceps. And what that means, and what we know through skill acquisition, which is um, theory in sports science, where you look at how people develop skill, is these big motor movements tend to be directional. Like you said before, you see the tree and you move towards the tree. Once we've made that movement and we've got down to the shot, we enter the alignment phase. So now we're looking at a fine motor movement. It's usually just the arm, and we're trying to find the 4 points of contact: the bridge hand, the chin, the chest, and the back arm. Some people don't use all four. Some people just use two. Some people use three. Essentially, what's happening in this phase is we're aligning down undershot to what we saw when we were stood up. Now we are at the aiming phase, and the aiming phase happens before the action phase. And the reason I called it the aiming phase is because of the quiet eye. It's an aiming, it's a visual motor skill. Um, and what you're doing at this phase is you're using small motor movements, usually just your arms. So I can literally show you the only movement that really should be happening. Some people have other ones, is just the feathering of the arm. And the only muscles that are activated here are here, here, and here. If you have like a long extended backswing, then your arm will drop and will activate these muscles also. Some people have like an extended wrist action where they'll go like this. Some people use the fingers. But essentially, the muscle group that's being used is in such a small place. For me, it's my right hand, so it'll be the left. That these are called fine movements. That they're very fine, they're very small. And what we know from the research is fine motor movements are difficult. They're used in accuracy sports, such as snooker, pool, darts, golf. And the big motor movements are more directional. They tend to be used in rugby, football, basketball, these sports where you're moving in different areas. Sorry. the computer screen bubbled down.
You're moving in different areas. Your laptop is.
Yeah. The tornado
Okay.
suddenly hit.
Great stuff. Great stuff. This.
The final phase is the action phase. So the action phase is where you deliver the cue. So if I'm coaching someone, I'm usually asking them to first, at the end of the aiming phase, going into the action phase, I would usually train quiet eye, smooth back swing, smooth delivery. I usually wouldn't focus on a contact point because you'd want to have the focus of attention to be external, outside of the body, rather than internal, or that restarts that cognitive thinking about where you're putting your cue. And we don't want that because then you're thinking about the cognitive stage of the Fitz and Posner. I remembered it, the Fitz and Posner 3 stages. You're making it cognitive at that point. So you want it to be kind of outside of yourself. So you might focus on the line of aim, the quiet eye, where you're hitting, the rhythm of the cue, because that's external, smooth through the cue ball, how it feels, the sound. You might be focusing on them stuff. And you're actually doing the action. So the 5 phases are assessment, approach, alignment, aiming, and action. And hopefully, and this is my goal and my dream, is that throughout my PhD, by the time I get to 30, 40, 50, I'll be able to tick these boxes off. And by the time I'm 40, I should have a coaching model that's data-driven, evidence-based, looking at these 5 areas, different behaviors, different technical thoughts, different visual thoughts, different cognitive thinking, body movement, motor mechanics, biomechanics, all just on cue sports. And my goal is to get my PhD and then to have other students working under me so that we can build this huge knowledge base. Because if you look at other sports, you look at football, rugby, basketball, tennis, any other sport, golf, there's thousands of research papers. In snooker on quiet eye, there's only one, 2002, which is Williams. And recently there's been some published by Welsh and colleagues and a few others in kind of these areas at snooker, but very linear, looking at minor cognitive processes, usually to do with how they process pressure and kind of things like that. So even though that's like a really big step forward and where lots of people working hard on it, we're behind. And by the time I die, hopefully 50 to 60, maybe 70 years time, I want people to be like, actually, we're ahead now. We have thousands of research papers on that. Because for me, it's not good enough to just believe in a coach. I believed in lots of coaches that give me bad advice. I want to believe in evidence. I want to see it on paper. Everything else is evidence-based. Football is evidence-based. Goalkeeping is evidence-based. There's so much tracking that goes on nowadays. Why is it not happening in cue sports? Of course, I focus on snooker, but it can be any cue sport, you know? So them 5 phases, which I'll repeat again, assessment, approach, alignment, aiming, and action. You could go through them in your own club and create practice routines about them. Get one visual cue for each. What should I think about in the assessment phase? When approaching the table, what should I focus on? When aligning my cue, what behavior should I focus on? The most common is just tip to the cue ball and pause. During the aiming phase, when I'm feathering, what should I focus on? As I go into the action phase, what should I focus on? If you get 5 cues and you put them into a sequence, that's called serial processing. Serial processing is been proven to massively benefit self-paced, pre-shot routine sports, snooker, pool, Chinese 8-ball. And you get that pre-shot routine and you get that full shot routine, you get a practice routine that you can do in your own club, you can manifest to your own unique behaviors. So everyone will be different. Some people's arm will be here, some people's arm will be here, some will be here. Doesn't matter where it is because it's all about where you're placing your brain's focus, not your motor mechanics. And it's unique to you. So I wanted to have this idea that we could publish and make worldwide, but also that's data-driven, evidence-based, but easy to digest. Any cue sports player that's had one lesson, an hour on the table, will be able to understand what I've just said and be able to pick 5 cues in them areas and to do it tomorrow if they wanted to go to the club, you know?
Let me ask you another question. I've interviewed Matt Andrews before.
Sweet.
I know you know
Good friend of mine.
very well. I wanted to ask you, what is the correlation between, or what maybe other differences as well, between what you do and what Matt Andrews do? Matt Andrews, for those of you that don't know him, he calls himself, well, you explain what you explain Matt Andrews and his
me and
role
Matt are
in
good
cue
friends.
sports.
In fact, in between our break, then I just messaged Matt because he's traveling to Sheffield now to be in Ronnie's shop.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ring him after we come off the phone about 7:15, 7:30 UK time. So that's how close we are. Me and Matt work very similar, and to the point where me and Matt have had 4-hour conversations on car rides talking about the mental side of Q sports. There's a model in sport called the biopsychosocial model. Biology, psychology, sociology. So I'm gonna pass wind, sorry. Bless me, that's the coffee I've just downed a minute ago.
Not
Sorry.
cocoa. What happened to the cocoa? Have you forgotten about your cocoa?
Yeah, it was coffee cocoa, a mocha. That's what he made me.
Ah,
I just
mocha.
next it, you know.
Okay.
Yeah, so essentially, the biology is your body, the system, the organism, your brain, your muscles. The psychology is the mind or the brain. Sorry, not the mind, specifically consciousness. The brain is biology. And sociology is the people around us, our relationships, and how the environment affects the other two. And that triangle, biology, sociology, and psychology, always working together. No matter what sport you're playing, no matter what you're doing, them three things always work together. Even if you're not playing sport, they're processing. And a lot of what me and Matt talk about is how you can align them three things, specifically the psychology informing the biology and the social, to bring out the best in people. So we might do mind stuff, which would be self-talk, uh, pre-shot routines, pre-plans, meditation routines, anxiety management, correct stimulation, going back to before, task relevant, highlighting what we want to do so that when task disruptive and irrelevant comes in, we can refocus our brain and know what we want to do and choose that task relevant stimulus or choice, depending, how detailed language you want to use. So we do a lot of the similar stuff, and we're very much sing off the same hymn sheet. We're good friends. I think it's really nice to have ideas to bounce off someone who's on your wavelength and believes in your same sort of ideology. And me and Matt get on really well. So yeah, that's very close to what he does.
You mentioned Chris Henry before. A lot of respect for Chris. He's a well-known coach, and you mentioned the balls that he's brought out
product.
and invented. And for those of you who don't know, he makes them for snooker. He makes them for pool. Also, they're I describe them as oversized ping pong balls. They're it's that kind of weight, that kind of texture, right? And basically, what they do is they, in a very crude way, I'm going to explain it. You stroke the white ball onto a yellow ball, and depending on which side the cue ball and the yellow ball go, you know which way, whether you've cued across it and whether you're not cueing centrally on the cue ball. That's kind of it in a nutshell, right? Now, and I'm not saying I'm against them. I have tried them, and I get it. I get the reason behind them, and it does show you, it gives you immediate feedback. My only concern, not concern, my only opinion on them is you can get exactly that from using proper balls. Now, I think there's one thing that using the Chris Henry balls can take away, and that's the feel. Now, I think Q Sports is a lot about feel. But on the other hand, I also do see where they show you instantly whether you're going left, right, high, low, whatever. They are good for showing centre striking, but so is a measles white as well. So I just wondered if there was any. I mean, I'm not knocking the product. I've tried them and I get it. I can see. I'm very sceptical when it comes to aids that are being brought out all the time. You know, you've got balls, you've got a cue, go and play and practice with the actual things that you're going to be playing with. What's the counter argument to that?
Yeah, so well, first of all, I think you make a very good point. We would call that realism. So by using a training aid, you're going away from realism, and there's a risk that if you go away from realism, you're not training something that's going to be transferable to a match. So in psychology, we have, well, in skill acquisition, you have retention, recall, transfer. Retention, learning the skill, cognitive. Recall, being able to redo that skill where in the future, after you've retained the information, associative. Transfer, it's automatic. We're able to take that skill and use it in different scenarios, low pressure, practice matches, single practice, pool, snooker, and what have you. So what the balls do is they train when we were talking before about myelination, the theory in Q sports is, or the theory of Chris is, if you can myelinate pathways to a lower tolerance, then so we know that potting the light white is harder than potting the normal white. You don't have to be as specific on how you cue through the ball or where you're aiming. So if you can practice at a higher tolerance, i.e., you can myelinate pathways more narrowly and more specifically to be able to hit the correct point and aim at the correct point over and over and over again, you create something called a quality repetition. And what that allows your brain to do is when it goes back to the normal weight, your narrowed in focus is now going to be more specific, and you're going to enable yourself to hit that sweet spot more consistently, or just simply be able to pick the correct line and place your cue on that correct line more consistently. It does it in two ways, the balls. So you have the light white and you have the light red. By playing the cue ball onto the red, what you get to find out is your alignment, because it's very easy to put a full weighted cue ball into a blank pocket. Most people can do it who've even played for 2 hours. You know, it's like one of the easiest skills. But if the red goes to the right and the white goes into the pocket, then you know that you cued that ball well enough, but you've probably aligned the ball slightly off to the left because the red shot to the right.
Yeah.
So now what you can do is you can retrain your positioning or an aiming technique, depending on how you want to do it. Chris has his own way. Other people have their other ways. Chris generally works very well, in my opinion, to make it so that you're now aiming correctly to be able to pot that ball consistently enough. So what you've done is you've myelinated, you've created that habitual pathway in the brain, but you've narrowed it down in a tighter tolerance. So now when you're using full weighted balls, the odds are that you're going to be more consistent at using them. With the normal white ball, you get to check your cueing. Are you cueing through the ball correctly? And if you put the two together, you now get an aid that allows you to see if you're visualizing and cueing the ball correctly. And my whole PhD is visual motor workspaces and how we can control them using attention, motor movement, and by processing efficiency, making that the best that it possibly can be, make the best of decisions, make problem solve correctly, use the correct skills for them. And the balls do all three of them. They do them in all ways. They train from cognitive to automatic, and they give you augmented feedback. You get to see the feedback in action. You're not guessing. For example, there are some training aids where once you remove it, you don't know if that training aid's worked. You're now working without the training aid there. Well, actually, when you remove that, when you've used that training aid and you're actually playing the shot, you get to see all 5 phases of the shot, not just the assessment phase, not just that line between human and cue ball. You get to see every single phase and do it as normal, and then get the feedback after the shot. So I think it's invaluable. I think they're an incredible product. I've spoken to Chris loads about them. We've actually had days where me and Chris have just met at academies and talked about the balls for like 3 or 4 hours, and we'll ring on the phone and we'll talk about them. I think if there were more products like that, and I think there might be, I don't know him, but I'm going to shout the product out anyway. The one that Lee Walker and Mark Williams are about to bring out, that looks amazing. And the reason is because they use colors as well. That allows you to have direct augmented feedback.
I think it's called Q-Line. Q-Line, is it? Q-Line?
Yeah, I think Q-Line. Yeah, and it's very cheap as well. It's like £20. It's not dear. But But what it does, it gives you that augmented feedback between the human and the object board. There's other products that just show you the line, but you don't actually get to position yourself with direct feedback of knowing the color on each side. So you don't get that visual feedback. The only visual feedback you get is from the line, not from the colors as well. Where with Q line, you have the line and the colors. So you can kind of habitualize that pre-shot routine. And then if you use the balls as well, then you would kind of visualize the execution of the shot. So you get like both together. You'd know if you're hitting center. So for example, if you put a balls white and a Q line in front of it, you know, it's an amazing you get to see all 5 of the assessment phases.
It's a marriage made in heaven.
And you get to habitualize the Q line, and you also get to habitualize the ball's light ball. So I think it could work amazingly. And the more that products come out like this, the better. I've personally been critical of other visual aids because, like, I don't want to go into detail because I have tons of respect for people who've done great things for snooker. And I don't want to start bringing products down. But there's a few things that I disagree with other ones about how the feedback becomes a habit. You never truly know if you're habitualizing correctly, but with the Q line, you know because you've got the visual augmented feedback. So when you remove it, you kind of, your positioning, in my opinion, is probably going to be more accurate because you have both level of visual information to put the Q on. So yeah, so that's kind of the training aids perspective. And I know Chris wouldn't mind, but I hope Lee. I mean, I'll give it a positive shout out. So I hope Lee doesn't mind me shouting that either. You know, hopefully it's good publicity.
I was with Lee and Mark Williams recently in China. They were both at the Hayball. Lee Walker done quite well in it actually. He won a few matches there, and he's still got it. He hasn't lost it, and I must say, yeah, great partnership there. And Lee is a great coach, and I'm sure they're going to go on and do great things together. Just to nip back to the Chris Henry balls very, very quickly, I will say you've swayed me and you've made me see it from a different light, which is exactly why we're having this talk anyway, so that viewers out there can, you know, make their own choices. And where can people buy them balls out of interest?
So loads of places. Chris Henry's website. Matt Andrews has just put them on his website. There's an American pool player,
Tyler Steyer. Yeah.
He sells them if you're from America to save, you know, cheap postage and packaging. They're the 3 places that I know. And of course, if you're on social media, you can always message either of them. If you buy it off Matt, I think we've done a write-up. So I did a write-up for him, but I did a write-up for him, please. Sounds like I'm taking credit. That's not true. We did a write-up together that he could send out with the balls to help on the mental side of a pre-performance routine alongside the ball, which is really good. With Chris, you get like an online coaching course where he explains how to do the balls as well, you know. Same with Tyler. So it's like, it's a really great product. It really is for what you get. And I think, bless me, I think alongside Q-Line, it's a match made in heaven, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I've just had a little thought. I think Chris Henry done the right thing designing those balls the way he did. I mean, the amount of people must save on postage and packing is just ridiculous. They're so light.
Yeah. And the thing about Chris, again, I can't speak for Lee because I don't know him, but I'm sure he's a perfectly amazing bloke. You know, you said that. But the thing about Chris is he's in it for snooker. He's there to make players as best as he can, you know, and then they're the people that you can trust, you know, the people who are there to make snooker work. So yeah, I think the product's really good, and I hope that in the future people bring out more products like that. And I'm sure there are products out there that I've not interacted with that do have the same benefits that I've just explained, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point you just made there about Chris Henry and yourself and Matt Andrews, and certainly myself as well, can speak for myself, where I never entered Q Sports for the money, and I'm sure you didn't enter what you're doing for the money either. I do find if you do that, then the money never comes. But if you go in it for the passionate side of it and for your pure love of the game, and it's brought us together, right? We never knew each other before this, and we're having this great chat, and everyone can now benefit from the wise words that you've been giving us. So I'm a big believer in people, that do things for the love of the sport, and that's where all the great products in the
100%.
end come from, right?
Now,
go on. No, you. It's about you, not me.
But I was going to say, when I do my research, I think about the 17-year-old lad who was obsessed with snooker, but never had the self-belief or the knowledge out there to be able to excel at the game the way that people who maybe had more natural talent than him did. And I want to change that. In 20 years' time, I want a young lad to have my same level of passion and commitment and understand the setbacks and challenges of theories like I explained before, how to navigate that information to get the best out of themselves. That's my goal. Like, I see my research as a service to snooker, as a service to Q Sports. I don't see it as like, hopefully it does make me money, but I'm not doing it for the money. In fact, I've been offered way higher paying positions than what I'm doing now as a PhD. But do you know that I pay partly for myself, and you have to have pay the loans back and stuff. I could be in a much more financially stable position than I am. But every day I wake up, I do what I love. And like, I literally can't remember the last time I went to work and didn't want to be at work. How many people can say that? You know what I mean? Like, I love it. It's incredible. I get to go speak to the best players in the world, speak to the best coaches in the world. My best friend and like father figure, John Farnworth, is there every single day, and I get to speak to him and share stories. My life's amazing, and it's all because of this sport. And at the same time, I'm doing an amazing, not an amazing thing, that's for other people to judge. I'm doing something that I'm passionate about every single day, which is producing this information so that people who want to play this sport can be the best and maximize their potential and optimize what they're doing.
Yeah, and it really is fascinating stuff, and it leads me on to talking about different aids and things that some people may be used to enhance their performance, such as these things here in my ear. Now they're becoming ever more popular. I have an opinion on them, of course I do. I think they shouldn't be allowed. I think it's not a level playing field if somebody's wearing headphones and the other person is.
What, they're allowed in tournament games?
Well, local tournaments they are. They're not allowed in big tournaments because they've been banned. But I'm talking about lower level tournaments. But it does kind of lead me into the thought process of, if you're training and doing stuff with these headphones on, then when you go into an arena where you're not allowed to wear them, it's just a completely different experience. Now, I was told, somebody told me, you can put me right on this, whether it's right or wrong. People tell me a lot of things because they know I believe most things I hear. Right? So, the game of Q Sports, you are using all your 5 senses. Now, if you remove one of those, which is the hearing, I've been told that can affect your performance in a negative way instead of a positive way. What's your thoughts on that?
Okay, so it's a question I'm going to have to explain. So the information processing model, which is a lot of what I've explained through our talk, has 3 stages. It has sensory memory, working memory, long-term memory. Sensory memory, we sense what's happening in the environment, we process it, and it enters working memory, which is the amount of cognitive information, thinking information, that we can hold in our brain at a single time. For it to become long-term memory, we have to encode that information. The information that goes into working memory that isn't encoded is lost, goes back never to be remembered. The stuff that we do encode goes into long-term memory, so that at a later time we can retrieve it and bring it back to working memory. This all starts with senses. It all starts with sensory memory, how we perceive the environment. There are 5 main senses. There's a lot of research into other ones. I think up to now there's like 66 different senses that have been found.
What?
Sensory memory, like, it's really high. Like, things that you just wouldn't imagine are on there. But the main 3
tell us one of them. Tell us number 60.
Kind of thing. So the main three are visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. They're the main three. But for example, like heat is a sense, the way that we process heat from the environment. Now, most people would know that intrinsically, but they wouldn't talk like how often do you see snooker players? Oh, my hands are cold, so we'll take like a warm cup of tea or something out with us. It matters, you know, the way that the muscles flow, the blood flows in your hands matters. Um, so that's one that maybe some people won't think about. There's so many crazy ones. For example, like the vibrations in the air, delta waves in the brain, like just stuff that you wouldn't even think about.
Okay.
But the main three are auditory, kinesthetic, visual. They have different names. Iconic is visual in the information processing. Echoic, as in echoic, is auditory, and tactile is kinesthetic. So by removing the auditory stimulus, you do two things. You block out the environmental information, but also you replace it with a different type of information. Music tends to be. But second, what you also do is you override a sense. And we know that the quickest sense, I might have got this the wrong way around, but I think the quickest sense is echoic, and the second is visual. So you're more likely to react to something quickly if you hear it rather than if you see it. But they're really close together. It's like 0.006 and 0.085, I think. So like they're really, really quick in terms of reaction. But one of them is quicker than the other, and I think it's echoic. Sorry if I've got that incorrect, but I'm pretty sure I've got.
Speed of sound.
Yeah, yeah. So basically, if you block out that sense, it can have a positive impact because the other environmental stimulus, that task destructive information we're talking about, can't put irrelevant stimuluses into the brain. But what it does is it takes away from realism again. We've talked about realism before. You're no longer in a realistic scenario. If you're performing and you're at the crucible, you can hear, and some people say they can feel the crowd breathing on their neck, and you can literally hear it. So you're not going to be able to put headphones in when you're performing on the biggest stage. So it takes away from that realism, the realisticness of what you're trying to perform. My opinion is, if you're practicing, I would never have headphones in matches. Never. It's not realistic. But if you're practicing and there's task disruptive information in your environment that's causing you to focus on task irrelevant information, use headphones to block that out. If that information is auditory, if it's echoic. If not, I would just never use them, you know. But there is another third thing that you've got to consider. So when I play, you might be surprised at this, I use headphones. And the reason I use headphones is because I, at this stage, don't treat practice as something that's intense. I treat it as something that's enjoyable. And music allows me to enjoy my practice more. So it's like, there's that kind of psychological impact as well, where the music allows me to, like, you know, feel like I'm enjoying it more. It makes it more fun, if that makes sense.
That's okay if you're not trying, you know, if you're not playing, if you're building up to a local tournament where you're paying
if you're building
$10
up,
to get
I
in.
wouldn't buy them.
If you're building up to a big tournament, Steve Davis it was who always used to say he always practices like it's a match. So when it becomes a match, it's just like practice. I don't know. I've got no statistics to back this up or anything. I just get the feeling
a lot of information out there, you know. What you're talking about there is deep practice. It's in the book that I explained before, Talent Code, and peak. In peak, it's called deliberate practice. And what you don't want to do is you don't want to have information coming into your brain that can distract you from a task, because then that can take you out of flow, but it can also mean that you're not practicing to the highest quality. You're not focusing on the correctest things. And in that respect, headphones are a bad thing. They're distracting you from the task at hand. They're taking up a stimulus, and your brain is going to be listening to the lyrics while it's trying to perform, which means that you're not in a deep enough state. There is actually some studies to show that like, are they called binaural beats, something like that? They're really positive to listen to when practicing because they help to get you in a certain state of mind. But I would use them as part of a pre-performance routine, not as a performance. And the real reason comes down, and I've mentioned it more than once, is realism. If you can't realistically do it in a match, why are you using it? And it's a little bit different with like products like the balls because you're training a skill so that you can use it in the match so that transfer occurs. You can't transfer, echoic information and go into a match and have this music playing at the same time. So I don't, yeah, I would say it depends on what your motives are. My motives are to have fun at this stage and to just turn up and hit a few balls. But if your motives are deep practice, you want to get the best out repetition, I would probably advise against it unless you're blocking out essential distracting information in the environment. And the only way that you can practice is, to put the headphones in. That's what I would say. That's my advice.
Zach, look, this has been absolutely fascinating. I know we've only just touched the surface of this amazing subject, and I would love to do this again sometime.
Let's do it.
Yeah, let's organise something. Where can people get in contact with you? You mentioned coaching. How can people contact Zach Lamb?
Add me on Facebook. My name is Zak Lamb on Facebook. Surprise. But my page that talks all about my PhD research, it's only psychology, PhD research, is Q Sports Psychology. And all the information about me, you can message me there. I reply to everyone, assuming that I can. Might take a few hours or days, but I tend to have my phone. And you get to stay up to date and get mental tips every single day. Try to post 2 to 3 times a week. At the moment, I'm doing 1 quote a day every day for the World Championship.
Great.
My page is Q Sports Psychology, CUE Sports, and then Psychology, not an actual Q, CUE.
Are you not going to spell psychology for us?
Yeah, I'm going to pass on that. It's 7:15 here, and I've been up since 9 o'clock yesterday.
You've got a call to make with Matt Andrews. Give him my
know,
best.
yeah.
I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. I hope you.
No, I really have. Thank you for having me.
No, you're welcome. Thanks for watching, everyone, guys. More stuff to come. We're going to get Zach Lamb back here very, very soon. I promise you.
Do a trio, me, you, and Matt. We'll do a freeway.
That would be brilliant. Great idea.
I'll tell him now.
Tell him now and organise. Let's get it organised. Thank you so much, Zach Lamb. Thanks for watching, everyone. And I'll be back with another one of these fascinating interviews very, very soon. Thanks for joining us. Take care. Enjoy your Q Sports.